Okay, so I want to start today with a mental exercise. It might feel a little abstract, but stick with me on this because I promise it leads somewhere very, very concrete.
I'm ready?
I want you to picture a handprint, a
Mhm.
red ochre handprint, the kind blown onto a limestone cave wall.
Right, like the ones in Indonesia or Spain.
Exactly. This one is, say, 40,000 years old.
Yeah.
It's one of the oldest traces of a human being we have.
It really is one of the most haunting images in all of human history when you think about it. Just a person saying, I was here.
It is. So hold that image in your mind, the dust, the rock, the red ochre, and at the same time, I want you to glance at the device you're listening to this on,
Okay, my phone.
your smartphone, that perfect, sleek, black rectangle of glass and metal.
So here's the big question for our deep dive today. What is the invisible thread that connects that dusty cave wall from the Ice Age to the supercomputer that's sitting in your pocket right now?
You know, the easy answer, the one you'd probably get at a dinner party, is something broad, like humanity or maybe technology.
Sure, progress. Right. But if you really dig into the stack of research we've gathered for this, the real connective tissue is something much more specific. It's design.
But see, even just saying that word design, it
Oh.
feels too small, doesn't it?
Mhm.
When I tell people we're doing a deep dive on the history of design,
Yeah.
they immediately think we're talking about, I don't know, high fashion.
Or a cool logo for a new coffee shop.
Exactly. They think aesthetics. They think decoration, making things look pretty.
And that is probably the biggest misconception we need to just dismantle right from the start. If you look at the core definition from our primary sources, design isn't decoration. It is not the icing on the cake.
So what is it?
It's a fundamental human survival activity. It's the act of preconceiving a plan to achieve a specific purpose.
I saw a phrase in the notes that I just loved. I circled it 3 times. Problem solving made visible.
That's it, exactly. And the story we're going to trace today, it's not really a history of objects, even though we'll talk about chairs and phones and logos. It's a history of relationships.
Relations between who?
It's about the changing and sometimes really traumatic distance between 3 key figures: the designer, the maker, and the user.
And for most of human history, those 3 figures, they were all the same person.
They were one and the same. And today, interestingly, with things like artificial intelligence, they might just be becoming the same person again. But there's a whole lot of drama that happened in between.
It sounds like it.
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about the trauma of the factory floor, why the Industrial Revolution was, in a way, a breakup story. We'll get into why your phone apps used to look like they were made of leather and paper.
Oh, I remember that. The fake wood grain.
The skeuomorphism, yeah.
Hmm.
And we'll end by asking whether AI means the end of human creativity as we know it.
Okay, so a small topic then. Let's get into it. We have to start at the absolute bottom of the timeline. The research calls this the unity of craft. It's like the baseline for all of human history.
Right. So to get this, you have to strip away everything. Forget cities, forget factories, forget computers, go all the way back to the Paleolithic era. You're a hunter. You need a tool. You need something sharp to skin a deer you just caught. You don't go to Home Depot. You don't hire a consultant.
You find a rock.
You find a rock. But here's the crucial moment, the spark of design. Before you even strike that rock, you visualize the tool. You see the knife inside the stone. You simulate the future object in your mind.
Ah, so the design happens before the first chip of stone flies off. It's an act of imagination.
Precisely. In that moment of visualization, you are the designer. Then you pick up another stone and you start chipping away, shaping it. Now you're the maker.
And finally...
Finally, you take that sharp edge you've created and you use it to dress the deer. You're the user. Designer, maker, user. All one person, one seamless process.
And the notes really emphasize this concept of the feedback loop. Because you are all 3 of those people, the feedback on your design is, well, it's instant.
It is perfect fidelity. There is 0 signal loss. Think about it. If the handle you've chipped is too sharp and it cuts your palm, you know it instantly. If the balance is off and it feels clumsy in your hand, you know it. You don't have to fill out a customer satisfaction survey. You don't need to call a support hotline.
You don't leave a 1-star review on the cave wall.
Exactly. You just chip the stone differently next time. There is absolutely 0 distance between the design intent and the user experience. It's a perfect closed circle.
So that's the ideal state, this perfect circle. But as we move forward in history, let's jump ahead to the first civilizations. Sumeria, Egypt. That circle starts to get bigger, right? It starts to expand, but it doesn't quite break yet.
Not yet, no. But what we do see is the function of design starting to shift in a really interesting way. It moves from being purely about survival tools, like the axe, to being about information tools.
And this is where we have to talk about the Sumerian clay tokens. We're
Mm.
talking around 3150 BCE. And I'll be honest, when I first read clay tokens in the research outline, I thought, okay, this is going to be dry. But the details are actually wild.
They really are fascinating because we usually assume that writing was invented first, right? And then we started using it for things like accounting and record keeping.
That makes sense.
But the archaeological record seems to suggest it was the other way around. These little tokens, tiny designed clay shapes where one shape might represent a sheep, another a measure of grain, they were the precursors to writing.
Wait, so design came before writing?
Design enabled writing. They had a functional problem in a growing agricultural society. How do I keep track of my inventory? I need to know how many sheep I have.
A design problem.
It's a classic design problem. And the solution was a system of physical objects. Eventually, they must have figured it was easier to just press the token shape into a wet clay tablet than to store all the tokens. And that impression, that symbol, that became cuneiform, one of the first forms of writing.
That is absolutely mind-blowing. The act of designing a record-keeping system literally birthed literature.
And you see this deep functional unity even in things that we now consider to be high art. Take the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You've seen these scrolls in museums, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. They're stunning. Gold leaf, incredibly intricate paintings of gods with animal heads, all these hieroglyphs. They're beautiful.
They are. They're breathtaking. But to an ancient Egyptian, that scroll wasn't art in the way we think of it, something to be hung on a wall and admired. It was a user manual.
A user manual for dying.
Literally, it was a piece of information design. Its purpose was to guide the user, the soul of the deceased, through the terrifying and complex landscape of the underworld.
So all the pictures and text had a purpose.
A very specific one. The layout, the hierarchy of the images, the specific spells included in the text, it was all designed for high-stakes utility. If the design failed, if the user couldn't understand the instructions...
Your soul gets eaten by a demon with the head of a crocodile.
Exactly. That is arguably the highest-stakes user experience or UX design in human history. It really puts a buggy app interface into perspective.
Oh no, the button didn't work, and now my eternal soul is gone.
Right. But the key takeaway here is that there was no separation between the questions, is it beautiful? And does it work? It was considered beautiful because it worked so perfectly. The aesthetic was inseparable from the function.
I want to fast forward a bit because this unity concept seems to reach its absolute peak in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the cathedrals, specifically the Gothic cathedrals.
Ah, the great stone ships of Europe. An incredible achievement.
To me, and I think to most people, these buildings have always been about, grandeur. They're spooky, they're ornate, you've got gargoyles, incredible stained glass. We look at them and we see religious art.
That's how we experience them now, for sure.
But the architectural sources in our research stack, they paint a very, very different picture. They describe these cathedrals primarily as engineering solutions to a very specific problem.
And that is such a fascinating shift in perspective. A great example is the flying buttress. You know those big skeletal stone arches that stand outside the main walls? They kind of look like spider legs propping the building up.
Yeah, they look like an external rib cage holding the whole thing together.
Right. We look at them now and think, wow, what a dramatic and beautiful aesthetic choice. But here's the thing. It wasn't really a choice. It was a patch.
A patch? What do you mean, like a software patch?
In a way, yes. The client, in this case the church, had a very clear design requirement. They came to the builders and said, we want to build taller and taller, and we want the walls to be made almost entirely of glass to let in the divine light of God.
Okay, that sounds like a tough engineering brief for the 12th century.
It was almost impossible. If you try to make a wall out of glass and thin stone columns, the immense weight of the vaulted stone roof is going to push outwards and the whole thing will collapse.
Right. Catastrophic structural failure.
So the master builder, who, remember, was the architect, the structural engineer, and the construction foreman all rolled into one person, had to invent a way to hold the walls up from the outside. The solution was to build these external arches, the buttresses, that would catch the outward thrust of the roof and channel it safely down to the ground.
So that beautiful, skeletal, soaring arch. It's just physics.
It is form-following function in its purest sense. It wasn't decoration added on later. It was the only way to keep the building from falling down while also meeting the user's primary need, which was for more light.
So for literally thousands and thousands of years, we have this incredible harmony. The head that designs, the hand that makes, and the heart that uses are all tightly, tightly connected. The master builder is up on the scaffolding with the masons, the hunter is holding the axe they made, and then the villain enters the story.
I don't know if I'd call it a villain. Maybe let's call it the Great Disruption, or as you said earlier, the fracture.
The Industrial Revolution. It kicks off around 1760. The steam engine changes the world forever.
This is the moment the plate shatters. The steam engine arrives, and suddenly the potential speed and scale of production just it explodes. But to make that happen, to get that scale, you have to break the unity of craft. You simply cannot keep it.
Okay, explain that fracture to me. Why can't we keep the old way? Why can't the guy making a shoe in a factory also be the one who designs the shoe?
It comes down to one word: standardization. If you are making 10,000 rifles for an army or 10,000 teapots for a department store, you cannot have each individual craftsman on the line deciding on the fly how to shape the handle or where to place the trigger.
Because nothing would fit together.
Exactly. If every worker makes a slightly different decision based on their personal skill or feel, the parts won't be interchangeable. The gun won't fire. The lid won't fit the teapot. Mass production requires perfect replication.
So you have to separate the thinking from the doing.
Precisely. You have to take the design part, the decision-making, out of the workshop and put it into an office upstairs. A whole new class of professional is born, the industrial designer. He sits at a desk, he draws the plans, he does all the thinking.
And the maker, what happens to them?
The maker becomes the factory worker. He loses his autonomy. He is no longer shaping an object based on his deep experience with the material. He is simply executing a set of instructions over and over and over. He becomes essentially a pair of hands.
And this is where the blueprint comes in. The research makes a really big deal about something called descriptive geometry, which was formalized in the 1840s. And again, I have to be honest, descriptive geometry sounds incredibly boring. Why is it such a pivotal moment in design history?
It sounds so dry, I know, but it is actually a world-changing superpower. Before descriptive geometry, if I wanted you to build a complex machine that I had designed, I probably had to be there in person to show you how. I'd have to point and say, no, cut this piece here like this. It was all very personal and hands-on.
It wasn't scalable.
Not at all. But descriptive geometry created a standardized universal visual language to represent complex 3D objects on a 2D piece of paper with absolute mathematical precision.
It's like a translation layer.
It's the source code for the physical world. It meant I could design a new kind of steam engine in London, mail the drawings, the blueprints, to a factory in Manchester, and a crew of workers who had never met me, who had no idea what my original intent was, could build it perfectly, down to the millimeter, just by following the lines on the page.
That's an incredible leap in efficiency. I mean, that's what allowed the modern world to even exist. But at the same time, it completely severs that link between the designer and the maker.
It does. The designer in his office has no idea if the bolt he drew is actually hard to reach with a wrench, and the maker on the factory floor has no idea why that bolt is even there in the first place.
And that disconnect leads to this flood of new goods. Cheaper, faster, available to everyone, but there was a problem.
A big one.
A lot of it was ugly.
It was often terrible, and more than ugly, it was soulless. You have to try and imagine the psychological shock of this era. For all of human history, the objects in your life had a human touch. A tool had the mark of the smith. A chair had the feel of the carpenter. Suddenly, everything is cold, uniform, and stamped out by a machine.
And this is where the human reaction kicks in.
Uh-huh.
You can't just strip the soul out of production without people noticing and getting upset.
Yeah.
Enter the arts and crafts movement.
Yes, the great counter-movement.
William Morris, John Ruskin. We're in London in the 1860s. These guys are kind of the original hipsters, aren't they?
They absolutely are. They've got the buttes, the socialist politics, the disdain for mass-produced goods. They look at all this stuff pouring out of the factories, produced by the smokestacks, and they call it cheap and nasty.
And Ruskin's especially had this intense moral argument. He wasn't just saying a factory-made chair was ugly. He was saying the factory system itself was evil because it degraded and dehumanized the worker.
Life without industry is guilt, and industry without art is brutality. That's a famous Ruskin quote. They wanted to return to what they saw as the honest, noble model of the medieval guilds.
Hand-carved furniture, hand-printed wallpaper.
Everything made by hand. And they had this core philosophy of truth to materials. That's a key phrase from the research.
Right. What does that actually mean in practice, truth to materials?
It means honesty in your design. If you are making a table out of good solid oak, don't paint it with a fake marble pattern. Let the wood be wood. Show off the grain. If you're making a gate out of iron, don't torture it into looking like delicate twisting vines. Let the iron be strong and black. They believed that a happy craftsman making a beautiful, honest object created a better, more moral society.
It's a beautiful idea, a really romantic vision. But there was a snag, pretty big economic snag.
The price tag. This is the central irony of the whole movement. William Morris was a passionate socialist. He wanted art for the people. He dreamed of the common worker living in a beautiful, well-designed home. But if you're going to spend 200 hours hand-carving an oak chair using medieval techniques...
That chair is going to cost a fortune. It's going to cost a worker a year's wages.
Exactly. So the only people who could afford this socialist, anti-industrial furniture were the very wealthy, often the factory owners themselves.
That is the ultimate irony.
It was a fatal flaw. The arts and crafts movement ultimately failed economically. It was a niche luxury market. It couldn't stop the machine. But, and this is a huge crap, but aesthetically, it won the war.
Oh, so.
It completely changed public taste. It taught people to hate the fussy, cluttered ornamentation of the Victorian era. It planted the idea of fitness of purpose in the minds of designers. It essentially prepared the ground for the next major phase, which took those same ideas of simplicity and honesty and applied them to the machine instead of running away from it.
Which brings us to Germany. The year is 1919. Europe is in the ashes of World War I.
And the Bauhaus is born.
Right, so if William Morris was a romantic, looking backward to the age of knights and guilds, the Bauhaus was the hard-nosed pragmatist staring directly into the future.
That's a perfect way to put it. You have to imagine the context. The old world of kings and emperors was gone, shattered. It was a time of crisis and new beginnings. Walter Gropius, the founder of the Bauhaus School, and his team basically said, look, the machine is here to stay. We can't go back to the Middle Ages, so let's stop fighting the machine and learn to design for it.
And this is where we get arguably the most famous 3 words in the entire history of design. Form follows function.
Right, and although the American architect Louis Sullivan actually said it first, the Bauhaus really lived it. It became their mantra. It means that the way an object looks, its form, should be determined entirely by what it does, its function. No extra decoration, no historical flourishes, just pure utility.
The perfect example of this is the Wassily chair. If you haven't seen one, you should Google it right now. It barely looks like a chair. It looks like it's made out of a bicycle.
That's not a coincidence. The designer, Marcel Breuer, was literally inspired by the handlebars of his Adler bicycle. He looked down and had this epiphany. This bent tubular steel is incredibly light, it's strong, and most importantly, it can be easily mass-produced by a machine. So why are we still making giant, heavy chairs out of solid wood?
So he just bent the steel into a frame and stretched some canvas strips across it.
And created an icon. It's mostly air. It's incredibly efficient in its use of materials. It was seen as hygienic, easy to clean, which was a big deal in an era when people were terrified of tuberculosis. And it's beautiful not because of any added ornament, but because of its pure, transparent logic.
It looks like it could have been designed yesterday. That's the crazy thing about so much Bauhaus work. It still looks modern 100 years later.
That's the power of stripping things down to their absolute essence. And this logic, this search for clarity and order, it spreads. It moves from furniture and architecture into information. We see the rise of what's called the Swiss style, or the International Typographic style, in graphic design in the mid-20th century.
Okay, this is the obsession with the grid.
The grid is everything.
Now, when I hear the grid, I just think of graph paper. It sounds really rigid and constraining. Why did designers fall so in love with grids?
Because the world was getting incredibly complicated. After World War II, you had the explosion of global trade, international airports, multinational corporations. You suddenly needed a way to organize massive amounts of complex information so that it could be understood instantly by anyone across different languages and cultures.
So the grid is really about creating order out of chaos.
It's about clarity and, crucially, neutrality. The Swiss designers had this almost moral belief that the designer's personality should not intrude on the message. The design should be a clean, neutral, invisible lens that the information passes through.
And is this where the font Helvetica comes from?
This is the birthplace of Helvetica. It was designed in Switzerland in 1957, and its name literally means Swiss. It was intended to be the ultimate neutral vessel for information. It doesn't look like fancy handwriting. It doesn't look like it was chiseled into a Roman monument. It tries to have as little personality as possible so that the message itself can be the hero.
The notes we have make a really interesting connection here. They say that this Swiss obsession with grids and clean, boxy layouts directly laid the groundwork for the internet and for the interfaces we use every day.
Oh, it's a direct lineage. It makes perfect sense when you think about it. Look at any website. What is it really? It's a grid. You have a header, a main column, maybe a sidebar, a footer. Think about Google's material design system. It's all about organizing complex data into clean, digestible, rectangular chunks. It is the direct grandchild of the Swiss style.
So we've established this machine age aesthetic. It's
Yeah.
clean, it can be a bit cold, but it's incredibly efficient. But then corporate America gets its hands on modernism, and things start to change again.
Enter Paul Rand.
The legendary designer.
Mhm.
The man who famously charged Steve Jobs $100,000 for a logo back in the 1980s.
And was worth every single penny. Paul Rand and other mid-century modernists, they shifted the conversation once more. Rand was one of the first to prove to the C-suite that design wasn't just some art stuff you slap on at the end to make the ad look nice. It was a core business asset.
He had that great quote, "Design is the silent ambassador of your brand."
Exactly. When you see the IBM logo, those distinctive blue stripes, you don't even have to read the letters. It instantly communicates speed, technology, stability, authority. Rand proved to skeptical CEOs that good design builds trust. If your logo and your packaging are sloppy, people will subconsciously assume your product is sloppy too.
And at the very same time, on the product side of things, you have Charles and Ray Eames, and they seem to be softening things up a bit. The early Bauhaus stuff could be a little severe. The Eameses brought in a sense of playfulness, of delight.
They absolutely did. They were modernists, they wanted to solve problems using modern materials and techniques, but they didn't believe the user had to be punished in the process. Their famous lounge chair, it still uses industrial processes like molded plywood, but it curves to fit the human body. It's comfortable. They used warm colors and natural materials.
They added the human element back in.
Yes. They realized that function isn't just about structural integrity. Emotional function is also a function. Being comfortable is a function. Feeling happy and optimistic when you look at an object, that's a function too.
Which is a perfect segue, actually, because the user is about to become the absolute center of the universe.
Mm.
We are moving into section 4, the digital revolution.
The screen age. This is another massive fracture on par with the Industrial Revolution. Or maybe it's a reintegration.
Let's start with the tools themselves. How does the computer fundamentally change the act of designing something?
Well, the first and most obvious thing is that it digitized the drafting table. We get CAD computer-aided design.
So no more T-squares, no more compasses, no more eraser dust all over your sleeves.
Right. But it's so much deeper than just drawing on a screen instead of on paper. It changed the fundamental logic of what a drawing even is. In the old days, if you drew a line on a piece of vellum, it was just a line of graphite. That's all it was. In a CAD program, that line is data.
What does that mean? It's data.
It means you can attach parameters and rules to it. This is the birth of parametric modeling. You can tell the computer, this wall is linked to the height of the roof. The length of this wall must always be twice its height. Then, if you change the number for the roof height, the wall automatically adjusts its own height and length to follow the rules.
Wow. So you're not just designing a static picture of the object anymore. You're designing the rules of the object.
Exactly. It allowed for a level of complexity and iteration that the human brain literally couldn't manage on paper. An architect could test 1,000 different versions of a roof structure in an afternoon, something that would have taken years by hand.
And while the architects and engineers are doing that, the graphic designers get their own game-changing tool, the Apple Macintosh in 1984.
This is the moment of democratization. Suddenly, the roles of the typesetter, the layout artist, the photo retoucher, and the designer, all these separate professions, get rolled into one person sitting in front of a little 9-inch black and white screen.
I read about the paste-up era in the notes. For our younger listeners who have never known a world without Adobe, can you just describe what it took to make a single magazine page before the Mac?
Oh, it was a physical craft, a true manual art. You had to send your text out to a professional typesetter who would print it out in long columns on shiny photo paper. Then you'd run that paper through a hot wax machine to make the back sticky.
Like a giant sticker machine.
Basically. And you would literally cut out the columns of text with an X-Acto knife and paste them down onto a big piece of cardboard called a mechanical board. If you wanted a photo, you had to get it sized with a special camera and then glue it into place. A single page could take a whole team of people hours to assemble.
And the Mac just killed that entire process overnight.
Wiped it off the map. And of course, there was a huge backlash from the old guard. The established, classically trained designers hated it. They called the new digital designers primitives and looked down on the work.
Was that just snobbery? Or was there a reason?
Well, a bit of both. There was definitely snobbery, but also when you give people incredibly powerful tools without any training, things get messy at first. You had the ransom note effect.
Using 50 different fonts on one page just because you can.
Exactly. It was a period of visual chaos for a few years. But eventually, the tools and the designers matured, and we got incredible new abilities. The concept of layers, of transparency, and most importantly, the undo command.
Command Z, the designer's best friend.
That undo command is psychologically massive. It encourages experimentation and risk-taking because there's no penalty for failure. You can always go back.
But the biggest shift wasn't just how we were designing. It was what we were designing. We started having to design these new things called interfaces.ui.
And to understand the evolution of UI, you have to talk about skeuomorphism.
I love this word. It's a $10 word for putting fake letter stitching on a digital calendar app.
That's a perfect example. It's when a digital object is designed to mimic its real-world counterpart. Think about the early versions of the iPhone. The Notes app looked like a yellow legal pad with torn-off paper edges.
Right, and the Bookshelf app for iBooks looked like it was made of actual wood grain.
The calculator had glossy 3D buttons with drop shadows that looked like you could physically press them. The calendar app had that fake leather binding.
Looking back on it now, it seems so tacky, so cheesy. Why did we do that?
It wasn't tacky at the time. It was actually brilliant educational design. You have to remember, in 2007, a featureless glass touchscreen was an alien technology for most people. They didn't have the mental models for how to interact with it.
So the design was a metaphor to help you understand.
It was a bridge. It was a helping hand. By making a button look 3D and glossy, the design was whispering to the user, "Hey, I'm like a real button. You can press me." By making the calendar look like a physical day planner, it told you, "You can turn my pages." It leveraged your existing knowledge of the physical world to teach you, without words, how to use the new digital world.
It was like training wheels for the digital mind.
Exactly.
All right.
And once we all learned how to ride the bike, we took the training wheels off.
Enter flat design.
Right around 2013, with the release of Apple's iOS 7 and Microsoft's Metro design language for Windows, suddenly all the shadows vanished, the fake textures disappeared, the apps became these clean, flat planes of solid color and typography.
Because we didn't need the metaphor anymore. We got it.
We were digital natives by then. We understood that a blue rectangle with the word submit on it is a button. We didn't need it to look like a physical object. And there were practical reasons, too. Flat design scales better across different screen sizes. It loads faster. It's easier to read on a tiny watch face or a giant TV screen. It's actually very Bauhaus in its philosophy. Stripped down, minimal, function first.
But now it seems like the pendulum is swinging again. The outline mentions a trend called brutalism in web design.
Yeah, this is a fascinating counter-reaction. Have you seen those websites that look almost broken on purpose? They use huge, clashing, ugly fonts, weird, jarring color combinations, images that overlap the text, making it hard to read.
It looks like the website's CSS file failed to load properly.
That's the idea. Design is always a reaction to what came before it. Everything in corporate web design became so slick, so clean, so user-friendly, and so template-driven. You had the rise of corporate Memphis, that art style with the cartoon people with long, bendy limbs.
I see it everywhere.
So designers got bored. They got tired of the polished sameness. They wanted to introduce friction. They wanted to scream a little bit.
So it's the punk rock of web design.
It absolutely is. It's a statement. It's saying, I refuse to be polished. I refuse to be easy. I am not a seamless user experience. It's a protest against homogeneity.
So we've covered the how of design and the what of design. But the outline has a really important section on the should. Section 5, responsibility.
The conscience of the industry finally waking up.
Because for a long time, especially in the 20th century, a lot of design was just about selling more stuff, creating artificial demand, planned obsolescence. annual styling changes for cars.
Right, but in the 70s and 80s, some designers started waking up and realizing the damage they were causing. And the key figure here is a designer named Victor Papanek.
He wrote a book called Design for the Real World.
And it was a bomb thrown into the middle of the profession. He basically stood up and said, "We as designers are dangerous."
He's the one who wrote that scathing line. There are professions more harmful than industrial design, but only a very few.
Ouch! But he had a point. He argued that designers were directly responsible for the ecological disaster of consumer waste. We were designing useless chrome-plated gadgets that nobody really needed, knowing they would end up in a landfill in 6 months. He called for designers to stop making toys for the rich and start solving real-world problems for people in the developing world, for the disabled, for the elderly.
It was a massive wake-up call. So how did the industry respond to that challenge over the years? The notes break this down into a few distinct phases.
Right. The first phase was what you could call green design or eco-design. This is the recycle phase. It was very product-focused.
So things like, can we make this shampoo bottle out of slightly less plastic?
Exactly. Or can we make the packaging out of recycled cardboard? It's about harm reduction. It doesn't fundamentally change the system of consumption. It just makes the system slightly less bad.
Okay, so what's phase 2?
Phase 2 is much more radical. It's the shift to product service systems.
This is the move from ownership to access.
Precisely. Think about a power drill. The research shows that the average power drill is used for something like 13 minutes in its entire lifespan.
That's it. 13 minutes.
That's it. So why does every single person on the block need to own one that sits in their garage 99.9% of the time?
So instead of designing a better drill to sell, you design a drill sharing service.
Exactly. Or think about a company like Zipcar. When a car company sells you a car, their business model actually benefits if it breaks down right after the warranty expires, because then you have to buy a new one. The incentives are misaligned.
Right.
But if you're a company that's selling mobility as a service, if you own the car and you're just renting it to people by the hour, the incentives completely flip. Suddenly, as the company owner, you hate it when the car breaks down. It's a cost center for you. So you have a massive incentive to design a car that lasts forever, is incredibly easy to clean and maintain, and is modular so you can swap out parts easily. Your goals and the user's goals become aligned.
That's a total paradigm shift in how you think about design.
And the final phase, the sort of holy grail that we're still striving for, is the circular economy. This is the idea of designing systems where waste literally doesn't exist.
Where the output of one process becomes the input for another.
It's trying to mimic nature. Nature doesn't have landfills. A fallen leaf isn't waste. It's food for the soil. So you design products that can be fully disassembled with materials that can either be safely returned to the biosphere or endlessly recycled into new high-quality products.
Then there's the social side of responsibility. Universal design.
This is where we get the famous curb cut effect.
Can you explain that? It's a great story.
Yeah, sure. In the 1970s, disability rights activists fought for cities to install those little ramps, the dips in the sidewalk at intersections, so that people in wheelchairs could safely cross the street. It was seen as a niche accommodation for a small group.
But once they built them, they noticed something amazing.
Everybody started using them. Parents pushing strollers, delivery guys with hand trucks, travelers pulling rolling suitcases, skateboarders. By designing for the edge case, the person with the most specific need, you ended up making the product better and easier to use for absolutely everyone.
And what about participatory design?
That's another huge shift in mindset. It's the move from designing for users to designing with users. It's the humility to recognize that the brilliant architect sitting in a high-rise office in a major city doesn't actually know what it's like to live in a specific low-income neighborhood.
The people who live there are the real experts.
They are the experts in their own lived experience, so you don't just design for them, you bring them into the design process as co-creators from day one.
Humility feels like a really good word to carry into our final section. Because if there is anything that should make designers feel humble, it's what's happening right now. Section 6, the future.
The age of AI.
We talked about the Industrial Revolution causing that great separation between the designer and the maker. Are we now seeing them start to come back together?
In some ways, we absolutely are. Look at the rise of desktop 3D printing and the whole maker movement. We are inching back towards that stone axe model.
How so?
Well, if a little plastic part on my dishwasher breaks, I don't have to call a repairman or buy a whole new machine. I can go online, download a file for that specific part, print it out on my desk in a few hours, and install it myself. In that moment, I am the maker again.
You're closing the loop that the Industrial Revolution broke 200 years ago.
Precisely. It's a form of digital reintegration.
But the bigger disruption, the one that everyone is frankly freaking out about, isn't about the maker part. It's about the designer part. Generative AI, tools like Midjourney, DALL-E, and what Autodesk is doing.
This is the elephant in the room. This is the biggest disruption to the creative professions since the blueprint. Maybe since the printing press.
I was playing with this the other day. I typed a prompt into an AI image generator. I asked it to design a modernist lounge chair made of mycelium in the organic style of Gaudi.
That's a complex prompt.
And it gave me 4 distinct high-resolution options in about 10 seconds.
And were they any good?
They were incredible. And they were weird in a way that I don't think a human would have come up with. So the big question, if the computer can generate the options, what is left for the human designer to do?
This is the existential crisis that every designer is facing right now. But I don't actually think it's the end of the designer. I think it's a promotion.
A promotion? How?
I think the designer stops being the drawer of lines and becomes the conductor or the curator.
Explain what you mean by that.
Look at the generative design tools that a company like Autodesk is building for engineers. With these tools, you don't draw the part. You set the constraints. You go to the computer and you say, I need a bracket that can hold 200 pounds of force. It has to fit within this specific 3D space. It needs to be made of titanium, and I want it to be as lightweight as possible.
And the computer just does the work.
The computer's algorithm then generates 1,000 different design options that meet those criteria. And many of them look like nothing a human would ever draw. They look like alien bones or pieces of coral. They're organically optimized for strength and lightness.
So what does the human engineer do then?
The human curates. The human looks at those 1,000 options and uses their judgment, their experience, their taste to decide which one has meaning, which one fits the aesthetic of the overall brand, which one just feels right.
So our role shifts from creator to enabler of meaning.
Yes. The AI can do the math. It can optimize for weight and strength brilliantly, but it doesn't know if a shape looks friendly or aggressive. It has no understanding of cultural context. It doesn't know why we sit in chairs.
Yet.
And that brings up the huge problem of the black box. If the AI designs a bridge structure that looks like a chaotic spiderweb mess, but the computer swears it's the strongest and lightest possible design, do we trust it? We can't follow its logic. We don't know how it arrived at that solution.
And who gets sued if that bridge falls down? The human architect who chose the design.
Yes.
The software company that wrote the algorithm itself.
Exactly. We are walking into a legal and ethical Wild West, and we don't have the maps yet.
There's one last trend in the notes that I find really comforting and almost poetic amidst all this talk of robots and algorithms. It's called biophilic design.
Yes. It's this idea that the more digital and abstract our lives become, the more our bodies and minds crave a connection to the physical, natural world.
We want to see plants in the office.
We are biological organisms. Yeah. We evolved over millions of years in forests and on savannas, not in sterile concrete boxes staring at glowing rectangles. Biophilic design is the recognition that seeing a living plant, feeling natural sunlight on your skin, seeing the grain of real wood, these things aren't just decorative. They have a measurable physiological effect. They actually lower our cortisol levels and reduce stress.
So the office of the future might be incredibly high-tech, powered by AI, but it's going to look and feel more like a greenhouse.
I really hope so. It's a crucial reminder that no matter how smart our phones get, we are still animals. We are still bodies in a physical world.
So let's try to zoom out and wrap this all up. We've gone from a handprint on a cave wall to a Gothic cathedral, from the factory floor to the iPhone, and now to the neural network.
It's a massive sweeping arc.
But you said at the very beginning that this whole story is really about relationships.
It is. We started with the perfect unity of the hunter-gatherer. We shattered that unity with the factory and the age of separation. We started to stitch it back together by democratizing the tools with the PC. And now with AI, we're entering a new phase of, well, extreme complexity and reintegration.
But the core purpose of design, that remains the same.
I believe the purpose is eternal. Whether you are chipping a piece of flint with a rock or typing a complex prompt into ChatGPT, you are engaged in the same fundamental act. You are trying to change a current situation into a preferred one. You are solving a human problem.
I want to leave our listener with one final thought, a provocation that came out of the research on this last section.
Go for it.
We are rapidly moving into a world where the act of creation is becoming essentially free. It's instant. and it's infinite. We are about to drown in an ocean of AI-generated content, images, music, text.
We already are, really. It's just
Yeah.
getting started.
So in that world, does the very definition of good design have to change? If anyone can create something new in a single second, maybe the value isn't in novelty anymore. Maybe the true value shifts entirely to choice, to curation.
That's the question for the next decade. Are we returning to a new kind of digital craft unity where everyone is a creator? Or are we entering a new form of alienation where the algorithm is the only true designer and we are all just passive consumers of its endless output?
I want you, right now, wherever you're listening, to just look at the object that's nearest to you. It could be a coffee cup, it could be the steering wheel of your car, it might be the chair you're sitting in.
Just really look at it for a second.
See the curve of the handle, see the choice of material, see the font on the label, see the history. Someone or something made a series of decisions that resulted in that object being in your hand right now. And that chain of decisions connects you, in a very real way, all the way back to that first human handprint on a cave wall.
Design is the story of us.
Thanks for taking this U-Dive with us. We'll see you next time.